I awoke, like many of you did, Saturday morning to news about the start of the U.S.-Israel war against Iran. I checked on family and friends living in Israel, in particular my nephew and cousins. I read the news incessantly. I listened to podcasts that I agree with and those I disagree with. And I continued to read daily briefs. I worry. And so this evening, let me share my concerns and my thoughts. I have often said and continue to believe that we must take anti-Semites at their word. When they say they want to kill us, we should not say that's just bravado. Our history is filled with too many examples to count of anti-Semites fulfilling their murderous fantasies and wiping out Jewish lives. And when anti-Semites try to get the means to kill even more of us, we should take them even more seriously. Since 1979, Iran's leaders have chanted death to America and death to Israel. For decades, they have sought to build nuclear weapons. There should be no pretending that the threat this regime represents to Jewish lives is real. There should be no pretending that the threat it represents to America and its interests are real. My high school years were lived in the shadow of the Iran hostage crisis. I remember the daily counting of days on the TV, from its first days to the 444th day. I recall the blowing up of the Marine barracks in Beirut. I cannot forget the bombing of the Jewish Community Center in Buenos Aires in 1994. We should recall that Iran continues to support Hamas and Hezbollah, who share its anti-Semitic, genocidal designs. One core definition of Zionism is that we must defend Jewish lives not with words and arguments, but action and military might. We must write our own history and not sit around waiting to be the victims of history. Zionism is about taking the painful lessons of anti-Semitism to heart and taking the fight to the anti-Semites. There is no doubt that this war is Israel's fight. That is why the vast majority of Israelis support it, even though they are the ones running to bomb shelters in the middle of the night. Israel is obviously within firing range of Iran's rockets. To 93% of Israelis, it is a self-evident war of self-defense. This is why rabbis such as me, who have read and lived too much recent history, filled with anti-Semitic attacks and terrorist bombings, understand the moral legitimacy of Israel's fight against Iran. The State of Israel was founded in the shadow of the Shoah's devastation, and that past Holocaust motivates today's preemption. I stand with Israel. And yet military might can only achieve limited objectives. It can remove immediate threats. It can secure borders. Perhaps it can so decimate weapons stores, military know-how, and skilled commanders that it buys even longer-term security. War cannot, however, effectuate regime change. It's not so good about long-term objectives. For the first time, Israel killed a head of state. However loathsome Khomeini was, this may lead to unforeseen and even more dangerous outcomes. Our attempts at regime change in Iraq and Afghanistan failed. The Taliban are back in power. ISIS emerged out of our attempt to bring democracy to Iraq. And in the early 1980s, when Israel went into Lebanon to root out the PLO, Hezbollah emerged out of that violent quagmire. I wonder why we cannot take these lessons to heart as well. War can very well strengthen hardliners. Once wars start to rage, the dangers can start to multiply. That's not a reason not to fight them, when circumstances force them upon us, but it is cause to exercise greater humility and even more caution. Of course, the Iranian regime is not only a threat to us, but a threat to its own people. January's massacres are only the most recent evidence of that. But the quick and inefficient tools of war are not the slow and equally inefficient, but far more lasting work of fostering democratic principles by building responsible governmental institutions. I pray that the Iranians might find a new government and discover the freedoms they so richly deserve. The Iranian regime is a self-proclaimed enemy of Israel and the U.S., and President Trump is right to recognize the threat it represents. He is right to recall the many battles this regime waged against America going all the way back to 1979. And yet the president has not made the case to the American people why this is America's fight and why it is our country's fight right now. Just because I don't need convincing does not mean that most Americans don't deserve to hear reasoned arguments and weigh their merits. To his credit, Benjamin Netanyahu has been building this case for 20 years. And while there is consensus among Israelis about the need to take the fight to Iran, President Trump has not marshaled support among the majority of Americans. I worry his failure to make the case to Congress and the American people will further divide us and potentially lead to even more dissension and hatred in American society. It is a leader's responsibility to make the case for military action when it is this consequential and this sustained. In the American system, the decision to go to war is not supposed to be a demonstration of decisiveness, but rather an example of plotting and deliberate decision-making. Arguing the case for war before Congress is not just a formality. It is fundamental in our system. I am a Jew who has taken to heart the painful lessons of our history. And even though I may think that Israel resorts to military action too often, I recognize its necessity and moral legitimacy. I cheer the fact that in my own generation, unlike the countless generations of Jews who preceded me, the Jewish people can defend itself. But I am also a rabbi who has taken to heart the rabbinic tradition of peacemaking and compromise, and one that harbors deep skepticism about war. The rabbis began writing the tradition that I so love in the shadow of another destruction, namely the destruction of the temple and then Rome's ruthless crushing of the Bar Kokhba rebellion in the 2nd century. Their answer was not that of Zionism, that we must build a powerful Jewish army. Their answer was to prioritize compromise and peacemaking. In this week's Torah portion, we read about the building of the golden calf. According to the Torah, Aaron, whom Moses left in charge of the people, was not only a willing participant to the sin, but a leader who helped the people build their idol. And even though Moses is disappointed with his brother Aaron, Aaron does not get punished. And that leaves room for the rabbis to read his actions not in a negative light, but in a positive one. They see him not as the leader of a rebellious and sinful people who built an idol, but as the archetypal peacemaker. He kept the people together. He forestalled a riot. Rabbi Hillel said, "Be of the disciples of Aaron, love peace and pursue peace." The rabbis teach we should never cheer war. War is tragic. We must only pray for peace. At best, war only offers temporary fixes and short-term gains. It does not afford long-term solutions. There are no quick fixes. But despite my concerns and my worries, all I am left to do is hope the Iranian threat is eliminated and pray for peace. I pray for peace for Israel, for the Palestinians, for the Lebanese, and for the Iranian people. Ohev shalom v'rodef shalom. Love peace and pursue peace.